On August 24th, 2006, 11 months after the left breast swabs are in hand, with the known to have biological material on it available to be tested for DNA, DPS, the Department of Public Safety, the competitor to the Phoenix Crime Lab, is requested to test all of the biological material. By the way, something else I think I'm going to uncover during those depositions, or another way to say it, I'm pretty damn sure I'm going to uncover this. During that 11-month period, Phoenix says, you know, we want to just double check and make sure that we didn't overlook anything, that everything was tested. So they take a detective and they say, you are hereby christened, your job full-time from this point forward is nothing but to determine whether or not we have actually tested all the evidence in the case. Now, I can't wait to find out what happened because I don't know. I can think of the possibilities. Maybe that person whose job it was to go through and just double check to make sure all the evidence was tested somehow missed right on the lab reports that there was a left breast swab that was taken, that was tested, that had biological evidence that we didn't have a lab report for, that had never been tested, that was sitting in the freezer. Maybe they missed that. I don't know. Maybe they did find that. Maybe they raised that with the crime lab and said, hey, by the way, there's this piece of evidence that should be tested. I don't know what happened, but it didn't get tested. Until DPS got it. This entire mess of stuff is sent over to DPS. They requested to be tested at DPS. The request specifically includes the left and the right. DPS then changes the number, as they do in their lab, from the Phoenix number to the DPS number. And guess what? On September 11, 2006, DPS issues a report. I don't know yet, but I'm told that DPS, well, I'm going to come back to that. One thing I know for sure, because it's in the DPS report, DPS identifies Y-star match with Marc J from the left breast swab. Now, Y-star, I'm not a DNA guy, but I know I've picked up a little bit as I've been going through this. Y-star DNA is a little bit different than what we'll call the old school STR DNA. You know all those samples we've been collecting, putting in the database? That's STR samples. Y-star, different samples. So when the story first breaks, the story is DPS tested left breast swab. They got a Y-star sample on it that they connected to a Y-star match with Marc J. So initially, when I got involved, that was the case that was bothering me. Why did they test it way back in Phoenix? Well, Phoenix appointed or hired a law firm to represent them, and those lawyers graciously came down to my office because they heard on the news me saying, hey, I'm here to investigate and find out what happened, and if what I find out is that nothing was done wrong, then we'll just walk away, because I'm not going to pursue a case that's frivolous. They heard that, and they liked that when they heard that. So they called me up and said, hey, Mark, we're glad you're working on the case. We heard what you said. We'd like to come down and explain to you why we didn't do anything wrong. I said, come on down. Yeah. The first thing out of my mouth, as my team sat there with their team, I said, hey, I got a great idea. I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy. Let's do this. You guys are with one of those big law firms. You got a conference table this big. Why don't we just get everybody together? The crime lab people, the detectives. Let's get everybody together in a big room and let's all sit down and just talk this thing through and figure out what happened. If we get to the bottom of it, if we get satisfactory answers on what happened, well, we're done. I'll go back and tell the families, here's what happened. Nothing else could have been done to save your loved ones. I said, great idea. They said, no. Not doing it. Talk to us. I said, all right, fine. Here's what they said. They said, Mark, what you don't understand is that there is no Y-star database like there is STR. So in order to check the Y-star, we have to have a name of the person to check it against. And Marc J's name didn't come up until late in the game after the 8 people were murdered. I said, oh, all right, well, let me check that out and make sure. And if that's the case, then that's the case. You know, is what it is. They said goodbye. You know, And I said, thanks for coming down and telling me what was going on. We appreciate it. It's a good meeting. Everybody's acting in good faith. I said, all right, great. So I checked it out. We called some DNA people. We checked some things out. And what we found out is they were absolutely telling us the truth. That Marc Udo's name didn't come up until after the murders, that there was no way to check. There is no Y-Star database, and so unless they ran every sample of the, say, hundreds of thousands in the database, each one, there's no way to connect. And so this Y-Star thing just isn't panning out, and that's that. So I was kind of like, well, all right, I understand. But I'm also scratching my head and I'm thinking to myself, I don't actually have all the discovery yet. So I suppose I could take their word for it. But maybe I should just look for myself and just double check. Because, you know, it hasn't escaped me in 16 years that sometimes there's just a little more out there than they explained to me. Well, guess what? We got all these thousands of documents and we started tearing through them, and guess what we found? We found a lab report from DPS that absolutely verified everything that they were saying. But in addition to that, and what they didn't tell us, was that after DPS tested that left breast swab for the Y-Star and got a match to Marc Udo, they also tested it for a regular old school STR match in the old database, just like Phoenix could have done way back 11 months earlier. And guess what? Guess what the STR DNA matched, and guess who it matched right to? Marc Udo. So I immediately thought to myself, did they lie to me?
No.
I guess technically they didn't lie, but if they sat there knowing that the swabs had STR on it, that DPS checked for STR, matched to STR right into the database, matched to Marc Udo, and they didn't mention that to me, I guess that means I'm probably not giving them a courtesy phone call to say, hey, guess what? I'm going to amend my case, and I'm going to shove this case right down your throat. They can figure that out for themselves. So what we did is we amended our complaint to put that theory in there, having all the reports in hand to prove the case, and we served that complaint this week. And Fox News came, and CBS News came, and Jim Sharp had me on, and I told the story. And Fox News said, Mark, we want to be responsible. I said, responsible is good. I'm in favor of responsible. We want to take the lab reports that you say these things, and we want to bring them to a professor at Arizona State who really understands DNA. They did. And guess what they reported back to me? The professor said, everything in the docs say exactly what Marc Victor is saying. They got an STR match from the left breast swab that matched Marc Udo in the CODIS database that they just could have gotten in Phoenix without any problem at all. So I went down to the families I represent, 3 of them, and sat with them, not knowing really whether this was going to be good news or bad news. Because on one hand, it's like, yeah, we got a case and we can move forward. But on the other hand, I'm also here to tell you, your government has so absolutely, fundamentally, wholeheartedly, totally, and completely failed you because they could have so easily protected your dead relative from Marc Udo. I mean, really? We spend all this money for the Phoenix Crime Lab, for the detectives. The victim comes through and says, swab me. They get the swabs, they test the swabs, they know there's biological material, they got it in their hand, it's right there. They test it right, they got it right there. It's got the sample STR right there. They got Marc Udo from previous crimes. They took his blood, his DNA, they stuck it in the CODIS database just for this day, just for this purpose. This is why they did everything. Here we are, serial rapist, serial murderer, ready to go, and they stuck it in the freezer. And you know what else I'm going to find? The detectives who acted so honorably here to try to get the thing tested. They did everything short of coming over the wall at the Phoenix Crime Lab, breaking open the freezer and testing it themselves to try to get it tested. The Phoenix Crime Lab, this is what I can't prove yet, but I think I'm going to be able to prove, calls them garbage collectors. You bring us all this garbage. You bring us too much. We're overworked and underpaid and understaffed and all this stuff. So back to my question. How much green leafy stuff was tested during the 11 months that the swabs sat in the freezer? So that's our case. One other little thing of note here that's important. Lest you think the government plays fair and that it's an even playing field. If I do something to one of you or one of you does something to me, we get to sue each other, and all we got to show is that we acted unreasonably, negligently. That's what negligence is. Negligence is saying that somebody should have done, the reasonable person would have done this, you were unreasonable, you did that, that's called negligence, and you're responsible if your unreasonableness caused harm to another person. That makes sense, right? But when you're the government and you make all the rules, one of the rules you make is special rules for the government. Oh, you want to sue the government for something unreasonable? Totally protected. It has to be grossly negligent, which I would define as very unreasonable. But just curious, is there anybody here who thinks that, assuming what I tell you is correct, and I think it is, that the Phoenix Crime Lab did not act very unreasonably here? You think they're okay?
No.
Oh, okay. It was a confusing question, I'll admit.
Yeah.
All right, how about this? Show of hands. If you think the Phoenix Crime Lab was grossly negligent under all the circumstances, hand, please. All right, I know you think. Keep their mere existence, you think. Mark, question.
Yeah, I have one question, or just something to say, really. I have a close personal friend who knows Marc Godot and his wife very well, and they absolutely think he's innocent.
I know that.
And is he connected with all of these other murders, or
Well, he's
just?
been connected. He's currently scheduled to stand trial for a whole bunch of these murders. I think
Was
all
he
of,
connected to all the other murders?
well, the 8 that I'm talking about, he's scheduled to start trial in January. And I've personally spoken to the lead prosecutor on the case, who tells me that, Mark, this is a death penalty case. We are never going to make any offer less than death penalty. We are not offering him anything because our case is so solid that Marc Godot murdered all these people. This is one of the easiest cases ever. We can't even imagine how he wouldn't be convicted.
Well,
He's already been convicted of some of the rapes. I think he's serving 400 and something years on those.
But the DNA has actually connected him.
Oh yeah, I have lab reports in my hand with Marc Godot's name all over them.
Okay.
Question? Oh yeah.
Why didn't they test the other?
Question is, why didn't they test the left breast swab? That's the $100,000.
I got it.
Answer
If
over
my
here.
memory is right, I think they're solving like 35 or 36% of the murders. I don't have a background in it, but to keep that low number going, I think that's why they didn't test it. I got a feeling that put 4 people in here, and they'd probably get 50% guilty, probably. I mean, I don't know, I don't have a background in it, but they got an extremely low, insulting low rate of conviction for murder.
You know, some people have said, I guess that I would call these people sort of apologists for the government, have said, well, you know, Mark, there's a lot of pieces of evidence, and there's a lot of cases, and you know, we're understaffed and overpaid, and really, we test the right, we can't test the left. I mean, it's so, and I'll tell you what, even though I wouldn't accept this, it would make a little bit more sense to me in a case where, you know, you come home, and the front door's jarred open, and some knucklehead came in your house, or like my good friend John back there. John's got some videos on his house. And he's sleeping one night around 2 or 3 o'clock, and some knucklehead kid pulls up on a bike, and we see the kid on the videotape, and he walks to the corner of John's house, and he wrenches off the little dial for the sprinkler systems, and he holds it under his arm, and he gets back on his bike, and he drives off.